Rare Newsroom in sunny Miami, welcome to the Miami Real Estate Podcast, your home for expert insight on all things Miami real estate. Hi, and welcome to today's episode where we're diving into the state of the Miami condo market with a true expert in the field. Joining us is David Podein, an equity partner at Haber Law, where he's been a key player since 2009. As the chair of the Real Estate and Transactional Department, David's expertise spans community association representation, real estate, and construction law. His work with developers, investors, and community associations offers him a unique and practical perspective on the market. So, David, it's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see the office. Absolutely beautiful. You guys are right here in Brickell. All the action, amazing projects coming up across the street, legacy projects outside the window. Couldn't be happier to be here.
Likewise, it's a special energy in Brickell, right? And it's fitting because today we are talking about the state of the Miami condo market, a little health check. So my first question for you is, very simply, what is the state of the condo market in your opinion?
I think the state of the condo market, you have to look at different bands of the market. You can't just say the Miami real estate market in general. You can't just say the condo market in general. You got to look at the different bands because I think it's really instructive to dive into it. So you have obviously the high end of the market here in Miami. We have some of the best real estate in the world, some of the best product that's been delivered and that's coming online. And that's performing extremely well. You see at very high end projects, existing and new construction prices are really pushing into a new level that, just a couple of years ago, even in the COVID boom, people would have said, hey, really? You think you're going to get $5,000 a square foot? So I think at the high end of the market, you're still seeing very strong sales. You're seeing incredible product coming online. And then in the middle slice of the market is still performing well. We still have, there's a lot of noise in terms of, we can get into it. There's all these new condo regulations. There's some factors that are making it more expensive. But I think the overall story is like there's still tremendous tailwinds for Miami. We're battling some headwinds, but it's kind of like cycling.
Sure.
I think overall, like there's a stronger tailwind here in the Miami market, and the middle market is facing. We have some new reserve requirements. We have some new recertifications that require expensive repairs, but that's all going to work its way through the market, in my opinion.
Sure. And so you talk about the bands, high end being, let's say, the A market, the middle, which you say is still doing well, would be, I guess, the B. And then so the C's is kind of like the third would be the older.
There definitely is, those headwinds are stronger at the lower end of the market where you have many buildings, they've kicked the can down the road. For many years under the law and the governing documents of the buildings, the unit owners could vote to waive their reserves, put off, saving money for those projects they would need down the road. And many buildings simply have just put off their recertification project, put off the pain of doing these big special assessments and these repairs. And one of the unfortunate parts about construction and repairs in these high-rise buildings is a lot of times the cost of the repair projects, they increase exponentially. So if you start putting it off 1, 2, 3, 4, if you put it off many years, that project really becomes expensive when it's time to do it. So that's a lot of kind of what we're seeing in sort of the middle to lower part of the market is, you have buildings that have these recertifications coming up. They have reserves to fund. And then obviously the lending market is a little bit more expensive now with interest rates. But, we're starting to see them come down a bit. Right. And, everyone in the real estate market is getting a little excited about that.
Yeah, we're looking out for that. And so one of the questions that we have in here and that we're starting to look into the data is what percentage of the market is really that? We kind of wonder, is that much of an issue with the existing condo inventory out there for sale? Or is it just kind of a splashy headline?
I think it's a mix of both. It'd be tough to speculate. I mean, I've seen numbers that, there's something like 30,000 condos in the state of Florida that are subject to these new laws and regulations coming in. So it's tough for me to speculate like what percentage and where they are within the market. But, it certainly makes for a clickable, shareable headline to say, wow, this building in Miami Beach has a $25 million assessment. It's like, those stories never dive into the history of the building. It's like, how many times did they waive reserves? How many
Mm,
times did they put off their capital repair projects? Like, where's that building actually in its life cycle?
sure.
How many years of sort of favorable budgets and lower assessments did those unit owners enjoy to now put it off for now? And yes, those needs are accelerated and exacerbated with the new laws, but a lot of these stories, they don't really tell all the details in the
Mhm.
full history.
Speaking of the details, let's move into sort of advice for those looking to purchase a condo. So, given these variables in play, what advice do you have for purchasers? What should they be looking out for? What should the realtors be advising them on?
I think the theme there is to dig deeper, to do some more due diligence, work with a realtor that knows the building, knows what's going on the buyer's side, maybe even get your attorney involved a little bit earlier, and look at where is this building in its life cycle? What's going on? Do they have assessments coming up? Where are they with the reserves? Do they have construction? Do they have a loan? Kind of what are you getting yourself into? I've been counseling clients and realtors saying, almost treat it when you're buying a condo as if you're making an investment in a company. Because really, you're going to become a member of a not for profit corporation, the condominium association. It's kind of like joining a business, it's kind of like buying into a business. So if I was going to become a part owner of Cervera Real Estate, I'd want to say, hey, can I see the financials? I want to see your budgets. I want to see income, profit and loss. I want to see your governing documents for the company. And so really the theme is, dig deeper, dive in more, and do more homework.
Right. And so, what are some of the things to keep in mind then as you're doing your homework? What are things that you want to be looking for, or looking, or that's sort of a red flag?
So first, you want to see, where is this building in its life cycle? Is this new construction that's been delivered that's going to be turned over? So you might have some of the classic condo association versus developer turnover issues and resolving maybe some defects or some things there. Is the building more sort of at that 10-year period where you've turned over, you're completely away from the developer, but now you might have that first wave of repairs or things? Or now, is it 25, 30, 40 years old where you're going to have, you typically see these larger projects coming in? So really, I would say, like, number one, see where the building is in its life cycle. And then number two, you want to evaluate what's going on at the building. Like, have they been funding reserves? Are there any big projects going on? So, really it ties in with doing your homework.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the new market regulations and laws. You mentioned at the top with Senate Bill 4D and certain. I know earlier this year, Florida passed some regulations that is impacting HOAs.
Yeah.
So paint that picture for us.
To summarize, big picture, we had this horrible tragedy in Surfside where we had a condominium building collapse. And there was a lot of outrage, rightly so, of, how could this happen? Why would they take them so long to do repairs? How could it even get to this point? What was going on with the money? And then the Florida legislature had an initial session and they didn't pass anything. And then you had even more outrage from people in Florida saying, how could we not pass anything? Where's the regulations? So then, as you can kind of predict, we kind of, in my opinion, we sort of overregulated, and we came out with some new regulations on mandatory reserves that need to be funded by condominium associations. And then they accelerated what we've been referring to as like this recertification process, where depending on where you are with the coast and how old the building is, they've bumped up when these buildings need to be recertified. So that's kind of like bucket one. And now we've just had another wave of regulation, kind of what people have been calling Condo 3.0. And the big bill there was HB 1021, which we could do a whole interview on getting into the details of that. But that, in part, is sort of, in my opinion, a reaction to, you had, a lot of news about community association fraud and regulation and problems. You had a very famous lawsuit down at this Hammocks HOA. So that deals with all kinds of things in terms of conflicts of interest, records, reporting, qualifications, eligibility. So that has been, what people are calling Condo 3.0. So really kind of adding a whole nother layer of regulations onto the management companies, the directors, the associations.
For the end user, let's say somebody that's coming in to buy a condo, let's say either as their primary residence or maybe as an investment piece, an income producing property, which a lot of sort of customers do that here. How do these new regulations impact their day-to-day operation or life?
So I would say on the end user, the buyer, the member of the association, particularly Condo 3.0, HB 1021, you're going to get a lot more information. There's mandatory meetings on a quarterly basis. There's more information coming your way. There's stricter penalties on the association or the management company not giving you records or sharing information. So at a very high level, I would say as an end user, as a buyer, as an owner of a condo, you're sort of given more rights.
Okay, so it's essentially it's empowering the owners.
Yeah,
right.
and then I would say sort of on the investor seat, you had Senate Bill 4D, so you have these mandatory reserves, and then you have this recertification process. So that's made, at least in the near future, a little bit more expensive to own a condominium or certain condominiums, depending on where they are in their life cycle and which laws they qualify for. But like I said, I think, because the tailwinds are so strong, the market will work its way through these new regulations and these expenses. There still is so much demand for South Florida and Miami in particular.
So then, in general, your take, I know we've talked again offline. You used to live in a condo. You're a single-family home guy now. What's your overall position on the condo market?
My overall position on the condo market is the top end of the market is going to continue to run. It's still long Miami. It's still a lot of tailwinds. And, there's many reasons why Miami and even South Florida, I say Miami a lot, but I think it's important to say South Florida because there's a lot going on in Broward, West Palm. I think a lot of people are sleeping on West Palm. I think West Palm is just going to be spectacular.
Definitely.
In 10 to 15 years, people are going to be like, I can't believe this is here. I can't believe you could have bought in West Palm for this much with just Palm Beach, the island just across the bridge. So I think that the high end of the market is going to continue to run very well. You're going to continue to see this demand. Both what's amazing about this part of the cycle that we've been in is it's been domestic and international.
Right.
For a long time, Miami particularly attracted international buyers. We have a lot of connections, obviously, to Latin America, but even Europe and other parts of the world is a hub for international investment, second homes, or even people moving to live here. But now you've seen such strong demand from high net worth, high income earners from Illinois, New York, Chicago, New Jersey, Connecticut. So I think that has been a theme that's going to continue.
Absolutely. It's kind of COVID opened up the eyes, let's say the doors to the US market, and the international demand stays strong, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about costs, because I know, it's no secret the costs have gone up, carrying costs in condos. What are some of the main reasons for that? And is there any light at the end of the tunnel here for condo owners?
So if I had a crystal ball and I could get some answers about the condo market, the number one thing I would ask is not, hey, how are we going to get through these reserves and these repairs? That's going to work its way through the system. And overall, for the most part, that's needed at these buildings that qualify. But my main concern, and if I had the crystal ball, was, how are we going to get insurance under control? So insurance is one of the number one cost drivers at condominium associations these days. We've had, really skyrocketing insurance costs at many buildings. So that's a big driver. We've had some inflation in the U.S. economy, which works its way into just the overall budget of the condominium association because of things they have to purchase, of the staff they have to hire. And like I said, you've had these reserves they have to fund and repairs to do. So those things are really putting a lot of pressure on condominium budgets. I think in terms of those costs, like we've talked about a few themes here. We've talked about the costs, we've talked about some new regulations, but also this increased demand that, is still coming from multiple parts of the country and the world. And I think you're seeing that play out in these condominium terminations, which are more and more in the headlines. Because, that kind of speaks to the convergence of multiple trends going on. Because you have older buildings that are becoming too expensive to maintain, too expensive to repair. Mm-hmm. But we also have this huge demand driver. We have very valuable land.
Right.
We've got very scarce land here. particularly in Miami. We're bound by the bay, the Everglades, and the ocean. So there's only so much land, particularly waterfront property where you've had older buildings that are smaller, where the actual, to unlock that very valuable land, you can build a much larger building at these higher price points we've talked about. So you're seeing a lot more developers come in and buy out these buildings and terminate the condominium so they can redevelop it.
So talk to me about a scenario where condo terminations, which is a big, big topic of interest right now, where that is making sense for a building. Which buildings are primed for that? Because it's not an easy thing to pull
Yeah.
off. Which buildings are primed, for a successful condo termination?
Yeah, it's very difficult to get, 5 people in a condominium to agree to do something, let alone, a lot of these times it requires an 80% vote, sometimes it's even 100. There's a lot of legal wrangling that goes on there. So yes, these are very difficult to pull off, but it makes sense where a building is facing very expensive repairs. Maybe they even have budget deficits they've kicked down the road. So a lot of times, people might be facing an assessment that could be 50, 60% plus the value of the actual unit, where in the unit without being sold in a bulk way. And then people might say, hey, if we all band together and sell, so we can actually unlock the value of this dirt, this beachfront property, wherever the building might be located. That's sometimes where you start to see these make sense because people are able to achieve a higher price point than they would just on an individual sale. Particularly, sometimes these units are being sold now where there's a pending special assessment and buyers are saying, hey, seller, I want that to come out of your side of the closing statement. So I think it makes sense sometimes in these buildings where they're facing very expensive assessments. They have extremely valuable land. The owners, the sellers, can achieve a higher multiple on selling as a group. So they're actually selling the land with the transaction as well, as opposed to one-off sales where you have this assessment to deal with as well.
Like, how does that process typically play out for a building? I know your firm specializes in helping condo associations go through this.
Yep.
What does that look like in practice?
Sometimes you see buyer groups, developers come in and they try to cobble together the units sort of one by one, and they try to contact everyone and they try to get as many under contract as possible to get to the threshold where then they can push through their termination plan. And those are very difficult to pull off. Like we talked about, some of these buildings are 1, 2, 300 units, and you need a high percentage of those people to all agree to sell to get those contracts signed. As you guys can imagine, you do lots of real estate contracts. Getting that many deals together, that many people to all say yes is a difficult process. Now, another process which I think we're going to see occur a lot more is I think you're going to see associations try to put themselves in the driver's seat. And they say, hey, instead of going down this path of 30, 40, $50 million assessment and all the construction that goes along with that and all the infighting and all the competing interest groups in the building, let's propose a conditional termination. Let's go to our members. Let's say, hey, if we can get a price of at least X, would you agree to selling? And if you can get that threshold, I think you're going to see a lot more associations pass a conditional termination where they're more in the driver's seat. They get the approval with a minimum price that everyone's happy with. And then you hire a third party broker to then take that out to market and say, look, you don't have to go through this piecing together the contract one by one. I've got the approval. We've got a floor price of X, and now drum up real interest in the market from competing offers.
I like that. That conditional termination sounds like a much more sort of viable way to achieve that threshold. And what about in cases where, and I don't know if the new law that you were mentioning before, HB, was it 1021, impacts the chances of success for termination, but what about in the case where you have a holdout or there's a contention? Like I'm referring specifically, there was a big headline in the Real Deal about this happening in Edgewater and a new development involved. So what happens in that case?
Great question. So the new laws have not touched on the termination procedures for the most part, and you're seeing a lot of people in the industry call for that, asking, hey, we need some more clarity around the situation. There's a lot of capital that wants to pursue these. The market needs it. It will help older buildings. It'll help investors. It'll help the market overall. So you're seeing people beating the drum that they want more certainty around how to do the termination, what the exact vote is, how to pull it off, so they can proceed with certainty and not face these holdouts. So a lot of times you see buildings that have holdouts in a couple ways. Some prime buildings, if you look, where people have already done the analysis of what vote is required and what um, objections they face, you have investors that own a veto block in these buildings. And so if 10% could block it based on, or 5% based on, what law and what their governing documents say, you see people that own a veto block and they say, okay, we have to be dealt with. We have to be dealt with, and those are just like investors. They're just looking at the numbers on Excel and what they're going to make as a return. The problem with condo terminations is each seller can be totally different. You can have my grandmother who lives there, who her whole life is within 5 blocks of the building, and that's where her memories are, and you can pay her 3x on her money, and she doesn't care because she doesn't want to move somewhere else. She doesn't want to move at all. Her friends, her community,
Right.
Is all right there. But, and then you have other people that, they think that, oh, I can be a holdout, I can negotiate for more. And so you really kind of deal with like the full range of human emotions and experiences and kind of desires, for lack of a better term, in these situations, because there's so many sellers that have different motivations.
David, as we wind this out, final thoughts about the state of the Miami real estate condo market, and also tell us a little bit about Haber Law and sort of what you guys are passionate about these days.
Sure. At Haber Law, we have a full real estate transaction group. We represent buyers and sellers in high-end residential transactions. We're licensed to do title and write title with all the big companies. On the commercial side, we have a lot of experience in land acquisitions, value-add transactions, ground-up development. We also have a heavy practice representing banks and lenders to real estate projects as well. In addition, we have a full condo team. We do everything from the dog violation letter to a $50 million special assessment, the loan to finance that, all the votes and approvals, and all the construction contracts and planning to carry that out, and then everything in between. And then in addition, we have a litigation team that focuses a lot on business litigation, real estate litigation, as well as construction litigation. So that's kind of what we're doing over at Haber Law, or we're over in Wynwood. I've been working there for about 15 years now. We just expanded with an office in Broward and Palm Beach. So we're growing, and we're always looking for talented people that want to join the team. So that's kind of what's going on at Haber Law these days. And then overall in the Miami, South Florida market, like we said, it's definitely still long Miami. I think you need to zoom out from all the noise and all the clickable and shareable headlines and look at like really what's going on. And then even at the highest level, look at like kind of global capital flows, because, I think it's really important to see like the big projects are still getting off the ground. We're still, even in a tough lending environment, we're having huge construction loans getting funded. And those huge construction loans aren't getting funded. These are being underwritten, all the way down with a microscope. The sales are there, the sales and the demand supports it. So I really think, I'm a big proponent of Miami. There's a lot to talk about in terms of some very specific headwinds that the market faces, that the condo market faces, that, sort of Class B and Class C condominiums face. But, really look overall at Miami. If you really zoom out at our growth and at the demand, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. Long Miami all the way, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to leave it there. This was David Podein with Haber Law. David, thanks again for coming and sharing your insights with us. If you are in a condo association, or you have questions related to everything David mentioned here, you need title, you need the dog letter written, make sure to give them a ring. David, thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me. Beautiful office here, and I want to thank the team for setting this up. It's really a pleasure.
Absolutely. So for all of you listening, thank you again. We'll see you soon. And remember, until then, here in Miami, the future is always bright. Take care, folks.